On this episode of the Leadership Hustle, we're going to talk about some behaviors that you might be demonstrating that are shutting people down. Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Hi there, and welcome back to the Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Fredrickson.
I'm Michelle Hill, if I can say my name.
Well, welcome back to our Leadership Hustle episode. And today, one of the things that occurred to Michelle and I as we were preparing for these podcasts was during our conversation, we recognized how often people are inadvertently shutting down the other people in the group or shutting down the person that they're talking to. Mm-hmm. And as we were dissecting this, we discovered that there are a couple of patterns that people are doing that we needed to help people recognize that they were shutting people down. And so, recent story, I was working with a group of folks, and the conversations were about some pretty personal kinds of things as it relates to ideas that people are passionate about and people feeling as though people weren't heard and things like this. And what I noticed in this particular case was that when someone said something, the response from the other people in the room started off with no. And so let me give you an example. When a person was asked the question, well, we'd like to do this as part of our plan. And the first person who responded said, no, we can't do that, and then started asking more questions. So you could just see the people who were making the statement, this is what we'd like to do, it was just like a balloon, shriveling up. Yeah. And the air in the room just like, oh crap, here we go, right? And so it got a little bit quiet, it's like, wait a second. And it was throughout the entire conversation that I was hearing, but what about this and what about this? And people are saying no and no. And then going into or justifying or switching the subject. I've also noticed that in rooms where people ask a question like, Michelle, do you have anything else you'd like to add? They would say no, and then they would tell more about something. Or do you have an idea of how we could go about doing this? And the person would use the word no, and then they would proceed to give some suggestions. It's like, what's with this word no? Yeah. So what are you noticing?
Well, it's naturally going to either do one of two things. It's if a person brings an idea and a person responds with no, they're either going to shut down at that very moment and really not engage much more, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not going to get much more information out of them or ideas or anything. Or they might get defensive. And so then it might feel like a kind of a battle back and forth. And unknown to the person saying no, they may very well be frustrated with an individual because it feels like we got to battle every time we have conversations. Right. And they're blaming the other person when in all reality where it's the no triggering it. And it puts people on that defense versus let's explore this, right?
Right. So it's interesting you bring that up because in the scenario that I was mentioning as we began this podcast, as soon as the person said no, the air went out of the room, and then the person started defending. And so it was, you could see and hear people listening to what the other person was saying, not to understand, but to prove themselves how right they were and to justify and to set things the way that they wanted to. So now it was a control thing and I'm going to win thing versus a scenario of let's talk about
this idea. Usually when people bring things, it's an idea. It doesn't mean, that this is exactly what I'm talking about necessarily, but it's more the concept. Now, how is that a concept apply here and here? Again, here are some ideas behind it.
Right. I'm also hearing that when a person brings up an idea, one, it's not fully thought out, right? Or it's not fully explained. It might be fully thought out, but it's not fully explained. All of the details aren't there, or all the rest of how they came up with this idea. There's no framework set up. It just says, this is what I want to do, and this is where we want to go, and there's this information. So people are just like shut down. And then it's like you could hear people realizing they're actually on the exact same page. In many cases, they are just not hearing or not saying what they really intend for the other person to understand.
Yes. Yeah.
So in looking at this, when you have noticed now people saying no, or instead of saying no, what do you recommend people, when they hear an idea and it's like, okay, here's the new idea, what are some of the things that you're suggesting that people do rather than start off the response with no? Because no is just a filler word for some people.
Yeah, no can be a filler word. And the thing is, though, it's like, get curious, because just because they, again, bring up this initial idea, most likely they're not providing the details like you just mentioned.
Right.
Or they're providing it just very, very limited, right? And you're saying, what are you saying no to? Why are we saying no? Let it be a conversation. So, there is an improv technique, which I think is extremely helpful, but it's yes and. So yes, you acknowledge, yes, whatever this is, and let's say you have a different path for it or an idea, that's not going to get you more information, but it does give you that yes, and I want to insert my information in there. But I think just starting off with, I like these things that you mentioned, but I want to understand more. And where you dive into more of a facilitated discussion, asking open-ended questions to understand, have they come up with this idea? What are we trying to solve? What were we trying to accomplish?
Right.
Where we're diving deeper into those things and not using the word no.
People have made this word a habit. It's a little bit like It's like no, but no.
Oh, well, and the but, just get the but out of there too, by the way.
Right. So I hear the idea, and I am guessing the majority of the time, whatever idea has been brought forward, there's some part of it that is good. There's something that they like about this. And just like you said, here's what I like this. Instead of looking at for why it won't work, which is what we're wired to do. We're wired to protect ourselves. We're wired to make sure that things are safe, right? That reduce the risk. So challenging ourselves to, okay, which is a filler word, but it causes you to stop and think instead of
breathe.
No, and it's okay. Here's what I love. And when you talk about the things that you like or that you love, there's a dopamine drip that starts coming out, and you will naturally start to smile as opposed to have this furrowed brow look that's like, well, that was stupid, because that's how people are going to read it. And even though that's maybe not your intention, people are going to go below the line, as we say, and assume that. So here's what I like. Here's what I love. And I think there's a lot of merit to this. Now, in addition to what I like, here are questions that I have. And you mentioned that. So here's what I like. Here's some clarifying questions. The third thing that you might add would be, here's what I would add.
Yes.
I would add, which is yes, and let's add these things to the idea. And then the fourth is, here's what I would change.
Yes.
And we always wait to the change because more information may be forthcoming as people give you their feedback. And so disciplining yourself and conditioning yourself that if the roles were reversed, where you were bringing the idea, the first things you would not want to hear is, well, no, or the look of, well, that stinks, or that's stupid.
That's stupid.
I mean, we've had the guts to bring forth the idea in the first place, right?
Yes.
So what would you like to hear? You would like to hear, I love this part. I think this is a really unique thing. I think this is a really interesting aspect. I think that this group of people or this they would love this. So talk about those things, because there was effort put forth.
There was effort. I mean, it can be something as simple as I've never thought about it that way.
Yes.
Right. It's, wow, I've never thought about that way or thought of that idea. That idea. I have questions now, right? It's like, okay, you got me thinking. And, and it's about engaging in that. And that really is part of, people talk about they want to collaborate.
Right.
Saying no isn't collaborating. It's about us being able to have the dialogue.
Right.
But if I unconsciously shut people down, they're not gonna speak up. And if anything, I'm gonna start conditioning them not to bring ideas.
Right.
So then that's another problem I might have as a manager or leader is my people don't think on their own. Well, maybe you're the reason.
I think it's also important to let people know the framework or the picture that's in your head of why you're reacting or why you're asking the questions or why you like something. Why you might offer some change
Yes.
perspective, because without that, they have no idea where you're coming from. So you might say, I like this. I think these things, I've seen this work. So in a previous life, we did this. These were the circumstances, which are different than what they are today. So now I have more questions. What I don't want you to hear is I'm saying no. What I'm saying is I'm really curious about this. Set up the framework. And people are like, that's way too many words, Andrea. All right? But if you don't, you're going to have to defend it. And that defending takes away so much energy from the possibility of what's going on.
And everyone starts going below the line, and then no one's creative. It's a ripple effect and not being productive and really coming up with good ideas.
Right. So you start off with, here's the framework, here's why I'm coming up with this, here's my message, and here's why I think this question or this ad or this change is important. If we don't say why, and even if it's, I just have a feeling, right? Say that.
Yeah.
Because we often confuse facts and opinions and hearsay as facts. They're not all the same.
Correct.
And so,
but it feels sometimes that opinion, the way it's delivered, can feel very factual.
Right. Once this came to my attention, I cannot tell you the number of times in every group I work with.
It's like, ooh, it's everywhere.
Or every one-on-one that I have, that the number of times that no or some version of no comes up. And no can be the actual word no, or it could be we can't do that.
Or no, that won't work.
That won't work. And all of those things shut people down and either leave it there or they become defensive, and now we're having a fight and we don't even know where this fight came from.
Yes.
Right? So I'm challenging you as an audience to listen for the words no, we can't, that won't work. Just challenge yourself. We all know that what you look for, you find.
Yes, well, and ask for feedback even.
How often do I say this?
Well, what do I do? Are there times when maybe I shut people down or cause people to feel that, that I don't like their idea? What is it I do? What is it that I say that might cause someone to feel that way? Do you ever notice that?
And watch people's facial expressions, because if they come in kind of nervous, kind of excited, they're watching your facial expressions. They're watching your reactions. They're listening to your words. And they're first going to look for, how do I be safe? And if they feel at risk, they're going to shut down or go defensive. It's fight or flight, right?
Yeah, fight or flight.
And so, first of all, challenge yourself, recognize when you are saying it. And second of all, get into the habit of saying, here's what I like, here's what I love, here's what's interesting to me. Things that are going to affirm people for the work that they've done, the thoughts that they've given forth.
That they're just thinking.
They're just thinking. We haven't made a decision.
Yes. But they're thinking about the business or whatever's going on, right?
Right.
And we want people to think about how do we make improvements.
Yes.
We don't want to have them stop.
And I can tell you, I have to work on this. I am not good at this because my brain goes to, okay, 95% of this is I'm with you, on board. What about this? What about this? But I haven't given anybody the context of the other 95%. And so I would assume people won't bring things to me because I'm going to tear it apart. I don't know. It probably
Might
feels
feel that
like it,
way.
right?
Yeah. Shut it down.
Shut it down. It might be a disagree, even though it's like, I can disagree, but I don't have to, nothing has to change,
Correct.
right? So recognizing that we need to affirm or recognize the effort and what you like and what work they've done. And then use, here's I have questions, or here's some things you might want to add or change. But remember that you have a habit, and that habit might include the word no, we can't, that won't work. And so people will just like feel like you're a donkey, like Eeyore, right? Here's where we're going, right? Anyway, so thanks for joining us with this episode. I don't know that I should have ended it with Eeyore, but anyway, thanks for joining us on this episode of The Leadership Hustle. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss another episode.